I think I have a problem. Because I was wondering, that's good. Yeah. Hmm? It was sorry for that. I was wondering what was happening. Yeah. Hmm? Just a minute. Mm. Oh. Okay. Because I see he's already meeting his
Let's
needs,
there. Just a minute.
but it's not. Is muted.
Yeah. No,
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, we've had a slight hitch because our account was downgraded by mistake. So now we're trying to sort it out. However, the moderator will join us in the next 15 minutes. So I'd beg to start the meeting. I'd now kindly ask one of our engineers to pray for us. Engineer Arthur Makanga, if you can kindly unmute yourself. Or Engineer Justus Otwani, kindly pray for us. Thank you.
Let's bow our head down and pray. Almighty Father, we thank you for this afternoon, for keeping us safe and healthy despite the ongoing pandemic. We pray that you may guide us through this meeting, and that today's topical issue of ethics in the building sector, that we may all gain insights into this and be better engineers. We ask you this in your name and in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you, one God forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Engineer Otwani. I'd now like to invite all members to inform the rest of our team, of our IK members who are not able to join, to please follow us live on YouTube. I'll post the link here so that you're able to follow through when you drop off in case of internet challenges because of the meeting capacity. And if our president is in, Engineer Nathaniel Matalanga, since everyone is finding it having a challenge joining, I'd ask Engineer Otwani to speak on his behalf as we wait for the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you once again, our moderator, as we wait for the main one, the substantive one, to join. And I want to start by sincerely apologizing for this hitch. But I believe that those who are not able to join can follow on YouTube. And we definitely hope that the substantive moderator is able to make it in good time. With those few remarks, I want to welcome you for today's webinar on ethics for engineers in the building sector. This webinar was organized by the IEK Building Sector Subcommittee under the able chairmanship of Engineer Shama Kiteme, who is our substantive moderator today. Thank you, Linda, for accepting to step in the interest of time. The engineering fraternity is currently facing an onslaught from other professionals and the public in general, all of whom are angling for a share in the heavy investment in infrastructural projects. The most recent attempt to change the Kenya Roads Act to allow accountants and lawyers to take charge of roads authorities flopped after concerted and relentless efforts to lobby MPs to defeat the Omina's amendments. Eternal vigilance is therefore required to safeguard our space, regain lost ground, and expand into new territory. Also, in the recent past, we have witnessed several collapses of buildings in Kiambu, Kino area. You remember the 5-story building, Vihiga, the structure at the referral hospital, Nyamira, you recall the county assembly building, Kisumu, amongst other areas. In fact, these raised so much concern in government circles, and in the recent AAK convention in Mombasa, the CS and his PS, Kihalangu at that time, were up in arms reading the Riot Act and demanding that we put our house in order. However, in many cases, the findings of investigations into these collapses point at a failure to involve professionals at the design and supervision stages. I think this is one area that we probably need to delve in and explore more during today's webinar, whether we are really doing enough Are we just carrying out design and not adequately giving adequate time to supervision? Because most of these are collapsing during supervision, or are we not just carrying out our designs as required? Or is it a matter of quirks? Because there's a lot of, so many quirks in the building sector, both as contractors and those technicians who purport to know how to go about this business. And I've also heard of unfortunate cases on social media, particularly where it's alleged that some engineers are paid a small fee to stamp those drawings and so on and so forth. So those are many myriad issues that I think this would be a good platform to explore and see just how we can reinforce our integrity and guard our space. Now, the issue of involvement of professionals is an indication of weaknesses in our own capacity as professionals to protect our turf and ensure full control of the entire project cycle. Engineers have been accused of abetting malpractices by acts of both omission and commission. The question is whether we are guilty as charged. I think the jury is out there, and I'm sure we can be able to do much better than we currently are doing, so that the public out there has a better impression of who engineers really are, and that they should be able to vouch for us at any opportunity where an engineer's service is required, rather than thinking that we are just too technical and we need to get other people on top of us to manage. In today's webinar, the focus is on the building sector, and our able and seasoned speaker, Engineer Andrew Kitololo, will assist us to navigate through this topic. And as we do so, we need to reflect on the measures required to enhance ethical practice through the entire project cycle and how we can free this sector from involvement of quacks. For instance, engineers are known to tend to be more of consultants than contractors. Can we move into that space? Can we ourselves be the contractors so that we are sure that whatever is happening, there's someone who can take professional responsibility? Now, at this juncture, I don't know if the president has managed to join us so that he can make his remarks. Maybe I'll hand over to the moderator. If he hasn't, perhaps you can give him an opportunity to do so once he's able to join. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Engineer Otwani. As you had mentioned, Engineer Salmon Kitololo is a seasoned engineer. He is a consulting civil engineer in Kenya who has practiced both locally and abroad. He's a fellow member of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya and also fellow member of Architectural Association of Kenya, and formerly a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers in the UK. He was part of the Engineers Board of Kenya and IK Engineering interviewing panels for 15 years before stepping down. He founded Kitololo and Partners in 1978, which later changed its name to Kitololo Consulting Engineers in 1984. In his career, Engineer Kitololo has worked for both the private and the public sector on a broad spectrum of the projects ranging from roads, water, buildings, and the industry itself. So I'd like to welcome him to start off as we wait for our moderator. We apologize. Thank you. Engineer, you may take over.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. And we are here to sort of discuss the ethics for engineers in the building sector. Now, what is ethics? I think that's a good starting point. What is ethics? Ethics could be described as moral principles or moral code concerning how one conducts oneself and how one goes about doing things or practicing his profession. Now, an engineer himself can be described as a person qualified and competent to apply science to design, construct, and manage a project or a facility with the objective to improve the quality of life and the environment. So you can see here the engineer, that is his main objective. You can see from that brief description that the engineer is not there for money, to make money. He is there to help in bettering the quality of life and the environment. That is his main objective. Now, the engineer in the building sector would be involved in the planning and construction of buildings and the attendant services. The attendant services would be roads, water, sanitation, and power. Now, the ethics for engineers in the building sector are there to sort of control how an engineer goes about his profession. And it also helps one to remain competent and upright in his character as he deals with the design and execution and management and even maintenance of a project. So the engineer would be invariably expected to participate in project formulation and analysis of viability. And he is there in identifying a solution to a problem. A client would call in an engineer and express the problem that he is facing. And the engineer has got to find a solution, and that solution then has got to follow. That solution has got to involve very many steps. That is, if it is a building project, whether it is roads or buildings or an estate or any form of facility, the site selection is very, very important. The site selection, that is to select a site which is suitable for that particular project. A site that may be not swampy or maybe not too steep, or a site maybe that is not on some mushy ground or something like that. And then he would be involved. So he would be an engineer would be involved in site selection and then planning of the project itself. And then he would be also involved in engineering and geotechnical surveys, and then technical designs and writing of the specifications, both material specifications and technical specifications. And then later on, he would be there for construction supervision as well as the project closeout. So you find, because of that, the engineer is entrusted by a client with huge budgets. Those huge budgets also carry with them huge risks, which in many cases can be very enormous. And these risks, of course, involves the safety and the economics of a project. And because if a project fails, for example, there could be loss of life and loss of property, which then becomes the responsibility of the design engineer. So the engineer has to have integrity and intellectual honesty, and must be of sound character, and one that is adequately qualified, adequately experienced, and able to make decisions and judgments while carrying out his duties. So the ethics would therefore require that the engineer must maintain competence and provide excellence of service in accordance with applicable standards and codes of practice, as well as best practice. Now, a professional engineer would accept assignments only within the area of his training and competence, and he should be responsible for organization, execution, and quality management of those assignments. And yes, such an engineer will not influence or canvas for work or even supplant others or be involved in bribery. So loyalty and decorum and uprightness of character are to describe a professional engineer at all times. It is not something that you only apply in certain times. It is something that is part of your character as a professional engineer. And that is one of the items in the code of ethics. And the engineer has to aim to execute all assignments within the budget and completion period, and avoid dishonesty, wickedness, greed, selfishness, lax morals, and malpractices. He must be self-disciplined. So an engineer is called to be really upright at all times. He should be sort of angelic in character, because in order to plan and execute an assignment proficiently, one has to have morals, that is ethics, as to adhere to the standards and codes of practice. They are there, codes of practice are there. But how many times do we see things collapsing because somebody somewhere has not followed either the standards or codes of practice, or somebody has gone for shortcuts, or somebody has been bribed to under design or not supervise the contractor effectively. Sometimes it happens like that. Now, I would want us to quickly read through, or rather, I'll quickly read through the definition of a professional engineer, and then quickly read through the professional ethics and codes of practice and codes of conduct concerning the engineer. Now, the engineer is defined as a professional engineer competent by virtue of his fundamental education and training to apply the scientific method and outlook to the analysis and solution of engineering problems. So you can see here the education starts from education. Education at university gives us the tools, so to speak, and then one has now to go out into the industry and start to apply what he has learned at university. But then he picks a lot of things there. Engineering is not in a classroom. Engineering actually starts when one has graduated and left the academic world and joined the industry. And that is where you start picking the various applicable methods of going about design and specifying and preparing bills of quantities and specifications, and then into the construction itself. Now, at the construction stage, the engineer works with the contractor or the constructor or the builder. And in many cases, the builders are very experienced people in that particular area, and they can see the flaws either in design or in detailing. And if they are not honest, they would go ahead and construct something according to what the engineer has detailed, even if he knows it may not work. So again, ethics here apply to all the players in the building sector. Yeah. So if I continue sort of reading this, he is also, this engineer is able to assume personal responsibilities for the development and application of engineering science and knowledge, notably in research, design, construction, manufacture, superintendence, management, or in the education of the engineer. So the education of the engineer, that is training others, training the younger ones. They come out as graduate engineers and they aspire to be registered as corporate members or professional engineers. Now, a lot depends on their supervisors, their supervising engineers. And here again, there could be some weakness in the engineering in this country, because you find the younger people are not given, or rather are not, the senior people are not giving them enough training. They are not setting aside enough time to train these young people. Especially today, when you have got several design packages, more often than not, the younger people are left to go into use these computer packages, and they end up sort of like parrot engineers who cannot um, explain why they are doing certain things in certain ways because they lack that basic training in the industry. So the senior ones have to spend a lot of time to bring in these young people, young engineers, to be sound engineers, to be reliable engineers, to be professional engineers. Yeah, they could be producing drawings and the details, but that's it because it's there, the what we should realize is that these computer design packages are somebody's thoughts. Yeah, that is how those authors would do things, but they may not be the way you want to do things, or they may not be applicable in every project, and especially in the building industry. Virtually every project is unique in itself. Yeah, there is nothing that can be stereotyped in building design and detailing and construction. Um, so we move on and say the work of a professional engineer is predominantly intellectual and varied, and not of a routine mental or physical character. It requires the exercise of original thought. There it is. Yeah. And judgment and the ability to supervise the technical and administrative work of others. Yeah. So here, nurturing younger ones is very, very, very important and is stressed there as one of the main points of ethics. Now, his education will have been such as to make him capable of closely and continuously following the progress in his branch of engineering science by consulting newly published work on worldwide basis, assimilating such information and applying it independently. Yeah, so we have to keep up. The technology is changing very fast, and you cannot just sit back and expect to remain relevant in engineering. You have also to follow up in what is happening in the world by reading and so forth. So you find reading does not stop at university. Reading, especially for structural engineers who are directly involved in buildings, it's very important, keeping up to date with what is happening. There are new theories, there are new technologies, there are new codes of practice, there are new standards of materials and so forth, which are there, which are coming up every day, and one has to keep up. It is not graduation is not a one-off kind of thing. I normally say education never stops for anybody. It is always there. We are always learning, all of us. And whether you are young or you have been there for many years, or whether you have been doing complex projects and so forth or not, you are always in the learning process in engineering. Yeah. So the engineer is therefore placed in a position to make a contribution to the development of engineering science and its applications. His education and training will have been such that he will have acquired a broad and general appreciation of engineering sciences, as well as thorough insight into the special features of his own branch. In due time, that is, as he progresses in the profession, he will be able to give authoritative technical advice and to assume responsibility for the direction of important tasks in his branch. Now, that is the definition of an engineer. Now, on ethics, talks of competence and excellence and integrity and honesty and so forth. But very quickly, if I may sort of highlight these points, the professional shall maintain his competence at the highest level and strive to provide excellence of service in accordance with best practice and the laws of the country where he works. He shall be of high professional integrity and intellectual honesty as a guarantee of impartiality of analysis, judgment, and consequent decision. He shall bind himself in conscience in any business or confidential agreement which he has freely entered into, and he shall not accept any payment except that which is agreed with the client. He shall display commitment and support for the profession by participating in activities of the association, especially that which promotes the profession and contributes to the continuing training and development of its members. He shall be truthful in describing himself and use only titles to which he has a right. Yeah, you might find people saying, I am this and that, but actually he's not. I'm a member of this, I'm a member of that association or that institution, and yet he is not. In other words, he should not be a quack. Yeah. And the engineer shall accept assignment only within the area of his training and competence. Beyond this, he shall seek collaboration with appropriate experts. Okay, in other words, the Kenyan situation is such that some assignments are given to on the basis of who one knows. It is not on the basis of merit or relevant experience. So you find projects which malfunction or which fail completely because the people that were given that particular assignment on the basis of favoritism are not able to do justice to the design and detailing of that particular assignment. And I think this is what this particular one is talking about. So you have to get to seek assignments only in the area of your training and competence. And it is saying, you get appropriate experts to assist you in executing that assignment. And the engineer shall maintain a clear definition of the services required of him and shall be responsible for organization execution, and quality management of his assignment. So you can see the responsibility here is big on the engineer. It is not something that one can take for granted. It is a serious thing, to be an engineer and to be given an assignment by, say, a client. The client gives you an assignment because he believes you would be able to manage his budget and also to carry out the service that he requires. Now, at this point, we can maybe look at while we are talking about this, we might look at the relationship, say, between the architect and the structural engineer in this country. Now, the architect, we have to understand that the architect has been trained to deal with form and function. And his role ends there, really. The form, action, and function. In other words, that is space design and aesthetics. Yeah. But then the rest is done by the structural engineer. It is the structural engineer who starts going to the site to get to determine the soil properties, to carry out the geotechnical survey, and to determine the type of foundations that would be suitable for that particular project and on that particular site. Yeah, and there are many types of foundations, of course, depending on the soil conditions. And then the engineer also, the structural engineer also, is responsible for structural integrity of that form which the architect has designed, or has produced, or has specified. And it's the engineer that makes sure that it can stand. That is the supporting frame. And also it's the engineer that has to consider the economics of it. Is the flat slab, for example, the most economical or the most advantageous? Or should we have a hollow pot slab? Or should we have ribbed slab? Or should we have another form of slabs? No. It is the structural engineer that determines that. But the final responsibility for the structural engineer there is to ensure that the structure stands and that it is capable of withstanding the external forces as well, especially wind and seismic forces, and also whether the materials used is specified are the correct ones, and so forth. So here, that is where now the engineer, the structural engineer, is the main professional responsible for the structural integrity of that particular facility. And in many cases here we see in this country, whenever we have got cases of collapsing or failing structures, the journalist would run to the architect, if they can get them, to find out why. And also in many cases, also they run to the owner of the project. Now, the owner of the project really is not, he has got professionals working on his project, and he has no responsibility apart from making sure that the contractor and the consultants are paid. That's all. That is his role as the owner of the project. And he has specified a problem. The professionals have identified a solution, and he just sits back and waits for waits for his projects to be ready. For his project to be ready. Yeah, but we find even the police would look for the owner of the building and look for the architect and so forth, while the engineer and the constructor are the ones that are responsible for any failing a structure. Either one of them or both of them. It could be a design mistake, or it could be a construction problem. Maybe both of them have colluded to cheat the owner. Yeah, and this I think happens quite a lot. And if we go into the causes of collapsing structures, you'll find either it's the structural engineer or the builder or both of them. And it might take time to determine who is who, but quickly, I think the police should be aiming at arresting those two players in the construction, rather than running to the wrong people who really have no idea why something has come down. Yeah, maybe especially the cases we have had in the Eastlands mostly, the owner is involved in the sense that after the engineer has prepared the design and the specifications and the drawings, he has been kept out, out of the construction stage. And then that way, of course, then the owner should be responsible because he did not retain the services of the structural engineer through the whole process. Yeah, from preliminary stages to tendering to construction. Yeah, in many cases, you get approval from the authorities, and then he tells you, "Thank you very much. Now I'll deal with the rest with my fundis." The fundis have no idea why such things have been detailed in a certain way, and they may start messing him around, maybe using wrong concrete mixes or using wrong materials and so forth, and things would fail that way. Okay, now this is where now it becomes one of the professional ethics requirement. During execution of any assignment, the engineer shall take all necessary steps to overcome any challenges encountered while enforcing safety requirements to persons, equipment, and property. He shall accept remuneration corresponding to the services rendered and the responsibilities assumed, and shall assist other professionals involved in the project to receive their remunerations commensurate to their inputs. Yeah, I think that is quite clear. He shall aim at high levels of technical achievement that will contribute and promote a healthy and improved environment for his fellow men. So you see, that is now it came up with the definition of an engineer, the earlier one, that that his work has to help in the betterment of quality of life and the environment. And in the process, of course, he'll make some money or he'll receive some remuneration. Yeah. Now, there is also what you call social responsibility among the ethics. The profession shall respect the personal rights. The professional shall respect the personal rights of his seniors, peers, and juniors by taking due cognizance of their requirements and aspirations that are in conformity with the laws and ethics of the profession. He shall be conscious of nature, the environment, safety, health, and shall work to the benefit and welfare of mankind. Within his field of training and competence, the professional shall readily make available clear information of public interest to enable a proper understanding of what his profession entails. Now, we have been weak on that one as a body of engineers. The public out there, very few of them know exactly what engineers do. I have come across that, say, throughout all my life. Even today, I still get people asking me, what do engineers exactly do? Yeah? Because they don't hear about engineers. They hear about architects and quantity surveyors. Quantity surveyors because they are the ones that give them estimates if they want to do anything. And architects because they are always there to get their projects approved by the local authorities and other government agencies. But the engineer is sort of, he works quietly, or he has been working quietly. But things change. The world has changed. You have got to explain what you do. People out there in the world have got to know what engineers do exactly. You know, architecture comes up and people ask, "Who is the architect?" Yeah, nobody asks who is the engineer because they don't know what we do. Yeah, maybe it was like that when engineering was coming up, in the world, but things have changed now, and one has got to sell oneself. You have got to promote your profession. You have got to tell people what you can do and how you are involved in projects. Yeah. They see roads being done. Many people don't know that roads are designed by engineers. I'll tell you that. Many people don't know that. They think roads are built by constructors, and that's it. Yeah, because they don't know what's involved in roads, for example. You see this even with the institutions, government institutions. The MD or chairman would say, "We want to tarmac this road." Yeah. And they think if they call the contractor, the road will be done, because they don't know. They don't know how engineers are involved in roads, Yeah. In other services, it's the same problem. In water, they know the plumbers. Yeah, it's a problem. Okay, let's call a plumber, and he'll fix this. Power is the same. You call an electrician. So we find the engineer has not really promoted himself, has not sold himself to the public. The public don't know exactly what engineers do, and we have got to get out of that. Okay. Now, there is also the question of, it's an ethical question of corruption. The building industry has been accused of abetting corruption, and perhaps to an extent that could be true, because it is the engineer who is out there supervising the work of a constructor, and he is open to a lot of temptation. The contractor might have made a mistake, maybe his concrete has failed, and he asks the engineer, what do we do? And the engineer might be compromised and assume we can let that weak concrete stay until, of course, things happen. So to an extent, yes, even in services, in construction of the services, like roads, okay, the compaction is not up to what is required in the specification, but the contractor wants to move faster. So he would tell the supervising engineer, perhaps, okay, this will be okay, let's just leave it. And of course, with some kickback, he would say yes and assume things have been done. We know of cases where projects have been certified as completed or done to a certain percentage, and yet on the ground there's nothing like that. And it's always the supervising people or professionals who allow such a situation. So this is what you call abetting corruption. Now we have to get out of it, and we can only get out of it through the ethics, which we have just gone through. Integrity, self-control, honesty, all that. And those are the things, and also being sound in your knowledge of engineering, being sound in your training, being sound in that particular field involving or rather involved in that assignment. So that is basically what it is. Now, so that is corruption. The Kenyan situation is terrible, and it is up to us to work on that, work on getting the engineer out of the blame of abetting and participating as well in corruption. And So, to summarize then, we can say that for an engineer to plan and execute the assignment proficiently, he has got to have morals. He has got to adhere to standards and codes of practice and best practices. And I would say that the engineer's zeal should be driven by the desire to work for the betterment of mankind and the environment, and not money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Engineer Sharma is now on board. Engineer Sharma, you may take over.
All right, thank you very much, Engineer Linda and Engineer Otwani. Sorry for the problem we have experienced, the technical challenges. And the Secretariat has worked to especially bring me on board. I mean, I know very many people are equally blocked, and others are following on YouTube. I want to appreciate the presentation from Engineer Kitololo. You wanted to listen to such an experienced engineer on such an important topic. Now, we know that we are basically kind of marketed it as zeroing down to the building sector, but ethics cuts across, and we have a professional code of ethics that guides us from EBK, and some of us who are in other professional certifications, you still find ethics. I know in arbitration, you still find ethics. I know in project management, you still find ethics. But one thing that really excites me with project management is that they really summarize it into 4 things. They summarize ethics into responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. And so it helps me when I'm moving around know that if I ask myself those 4 questions, and I'm a practicing project manager, then I answer them well, then I still carry the code of ethics as a practicing project manager. And I think from the presentation from Engineer Kitololo, I could pick exactly a line that leads towards what EBK, our code of ethics, says. Now, fellow colleagues, we intended this to be a session that is an open forum, and I'm already seeing chats, which we shall be responding to. But you and I know that we have situations whereby we replace our colleagues in projects. How do we go about that? Is there a matter or a question of ethics? And I heard Engineer Kitololo talk about supplanting our colleagues. How do we get there? Do we undercut in charging our fees? And are there ethical considerations about that? We have been working towards a scale of fees. What about means issuing a rubber stamp so that you know, a design can go out looking like it bears my responsibility, yet in actual fact it doesn't. So those are basic issues that are coming up, but I wanted this to be an open forum, and I truly want to give opportunities for members to voice their issue, one in reflection to what a senior colleague has shared, but also our own version and thinking where our interest is. And I wanted to begin with a graduate engineer. Now, I'm struggling to see how to get to see someone raising a hand. I want to listen to graduate engineer give their input on this important topic. And then maybe Secretariat can help me know a raised hand, because unless I take off my video, I'm not able to see.
Okay, if anyone raises their hand, I'll be able to unmute them. Or
right,
you can just pick a member.
I wonder, a graduate engineer?
I'm saying if anyone raises their hand, I'll just unmute them, or you can just give me a name.
Fantastic. I want to see a hand from a graduate engineer so that we can contribute to this important topic. Now, I also notice some questions posted on the chat. Questions and comments, actually. There's a comment saying people don't hear about engineers because in Kenya, we have allowed the architects to lead the consultants. We lead consultants where they even dictate the pay. I think that is a note. When buildings collapse, the architects are on the forefront to explain, as opposed to when structural engineer. In civil works, where architects are not involved, engineers talk with lots of confidence. All right. Joseph Ngatia, thanks for streaming live. Was locked out, but now tuned in from Lokichogio. All right. Hello, Nogalo. My understanding is that specifications are not written by engineers, but are standards which engineers are required to follow during design and construction. Bernadette Sabuni, engineers can also apply scientific and engineering knowledge to specify. Remember, we use foreign standards in most cases. I know, because as an engineer, I do specifications. So I agree. Rotich Kosgei, sometimes specific site conditions call for the engineer to make specifications suitable for those circumstances. A very interesting experience, exposure about ethical relationship with seniors, colleagues, and juniors. Now, GE wants to contribute. Now, this is open to any other member, a PE, a CE. There's a question here from Justice to everyone. How does the Kenyan situation compare with other East African countries and Africa in general with regard to, I do hope it's about the topic. There's a comment from Thomas Oluoch. Design responsibility should not be left to the one person. Mistakes may be found in an engineer's work, not because of incompetence, but due to other factors like working under pressure due to clients' poor planning and lack of peer reviewer, an expense which many clients are unwilling to finance. That is an important point in my view. Then Justice Otwani again, how does the Kenyan situation compare with other East African countries with regard to one, conceptualization and prioritization of projects. Number two, construction provision of buildings, retention of structural engineers for entire construction phase, important. Number three, enforcement of the code of ethics. Number four, leadership of technical organizations. Bernard Makar raised his point is Engineer Kitololo has mentioned that engineers have to start promoting themselves and their services so that the public can know their roles in society. He said the public mostly associates engineering with work with technicians, say plumbers, electricians. It is how can engineers promote themselves and the services ethically? A pertinent issue. Raphael Muli, now able to join in Zoom. I was locked out, thanks. Raphael Wambua, professor. Raphael M. Wambua at Digital University. So I just read some of the comments.
Engineer Sharma.
Yeah.
Robert Joshua has raised his hand.
Yeah, please go on. You give your input to the topic. Robert.
Engineer Robert, you may unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. It's important we are discussing these ethics topics in the industry of engineering and construction. I would welcome all of us to maybe, if you find time, to compare the practice, for example, in Australia, how they conduct engineering activities. Like what really, you can be an engineer and really you maintain the ethics so very well, but then there are things you cannot control coming from the group you're working with in terms of ethics. So my input would be the control should really be the authorities. For example, IPRA, if someone comes to you and tells you he wants to, or dishes out his or her license to someone else to use somewhere else in a company which is not being run by engineers, then something goes wrong, then what happens? It is I think the issue is the control. The authorities are not doing so well to make sure that the ethics and the morals are enforced as it's required. Thank you.
Great, thank you, engineer. That's a valid point. The bodies that are oversight, taking lead into that area. Any other comment? Input from a member? This is an open session from the floor. Alex Nyobendo is saying, sorry, society has generally thought anyone who has done engineering can do any technical assignment. Engineers have supported this wrong notion by accepting to do even that which they aren't competent in. The presentation is indeed an eye-opener. Thank you. Yes, as engineers, there's Caroline Ayeko. Yes, as engineers, we should get our voices out there and be known. And yes, the young engineers should be nurtured in order to follow in the footsteps of those who have gone before us. Fantastic. Linda, do you have any other hand raised up?
Yes, Isaac Rono.
Isaac Rono, please go on.
Engineer Isaac, kindly unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible enough. I want to just say what engineer has presented is an eye-opener. Thank you very much, Engineer Kitololo, for exposing us to the ethics. I also want to say that as engineers, we need to really be overall in almost every aspect. Sometimes we concentrate in our engineering designs. We forget leadership skills, management skills, and even the soft skills about the communication. And that is why in most cases, managing projects, dealing with people, running the projects, we may end up being sabotaged because of lack of such skills. We are disadvantaged in most cases from other professions because we are so much concentrating in technical a lot. I'm not saying it is bad, but yes, we are competent. Even after learning engineering for 5 years, some have gone to masters. We need also to know how to deal with the other professionals. Otherwise, in where I work, we normally say any oversight is just like a written death certificate. We may, by having a shortcut, try to overlook other things, but who knows, maybe you, the person who was overlooking that project, can be inside that thing. And when the project collapses, you are also inside, you can go with it. If a fault appears and we overlook, it may capture us inside. Right, thank you very much. We need to really work on our ethics. Thank you.
Thanks, engineer. I'm noticing some more comments here. Michael Uta, thanks. That was good insight from senior engineer Kitololo. Hari Musembi, how do we as engineers avoid architects to dictate how we charge and architects to an extent of blocking interaction with the clients? Robert Joshua, question: engineers know that they do know what they do. Engineers know what they do and they don't necessarily have to explain to others. Enforcement of ethics and morals in the construction industry lies with the regulatory authorities, similar to what a previous speaker has also indicated. Now, I wish to speak this from Simon. I wish to speak on behalf of service engineers in building industry. Until such a time, the building code will make it mandatory for submission and approval of service designs and drawings, and ethical practice will still prevail, where clients or even architects encourage use of fundis to execute critical aspects of a project related to building services. Very important observation. I was involved in the building code, and really we champion the same. And I'm sure there is progress we are going to make. The building code will be enforced by the end of this year. Arising from my first point, that is Simon again, above, service engineers are compelled to undercharge for service failure, to which opportunities are lost to less qualified people. Undercutting means engineers put less time in the project at the expense of quality. Very important point. And yeah, undercutting. Why do we undercut? And what can we do to stop undercutting? Valid points and important conversation points. Is there another hand up, Secretariat?
Yes, from Kevin Ajul.
Kevin Ajul, is it Ajul or Ayul? I know if it was in Netherlands, Ayul.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Shamo. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, we can. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I just want to make some 2 points on one. I'm working at the county and I'm a graduate engineer, and I've realized that in the process of approval, there is no input as a clear input of IEK in that process. We worked with the World Bank in what is called e-construction, and I think the 3 cities of Kenya have really adopted it well, and it cuts out the services engineers input in that process. So I think if IEK can be working with these approval institutions to give their input and also stamp their feet on the engineering requirements and requirements which are required or which are needed in this process, that can really stream well the approval process. Then 2 is the aspect of the inspection. When now the construction is in progress, the team, NCA, counties, and even the IEK should not be working in isolation. There should be a team that randomly, now that we have the regional IEK branches, the team should be formed that occasionally works in collaboration, NCA, counties, IEK, and even the Department of Materials with necessary tools for testing on site, so that these quacks and contractors who are carrying out construction work without input of professional engineers can be identified and action be taken to them immediately. Those are the 2 points I wanted to put across. Thanks.
Engineer Shama, there is Helen Ogalo.
Thank you very much, Helen Ogalo. Before we go to Helen Ogalo, I want to note from Dr. Victoria Okumu. Helen, a minute. I want to note and register note from Dr. Engineer Victoria Okumu, if I'm right. Daktari, I assume it's you. Thanks, Engineer Kitololo, for very good insight on ethics. Another area that is largely neglected during project execution is quality control and geotechnical investigation. These two should be emphasized. That's a very pertinent point, Daktari. There's also a note from Maurice Joroge. It was great to hear from Engineer Kitololo from the conversation. It appears the profession will not grow unless we engineers streamline our ethics. It is therefore imperative that we engineers come with the ground rules, which will protect all our cadres and specialties. And then, yeah, Daktari, Dr. Engineer Victoria Kumu confirms it's herself. Welcome, Sana Daktari. Helen, you can make your comment. This is an open session, colleagues, and we want to just have a session, and we are taking notes of the conversations because we have had a presentation from our senior engineer Kitololo. Helen, please go on.
I'm calling from United States, and the practice that we have here, I hope everybody's hearing me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm practicing in United States, and the practice here is that when engineers do the design, there is somebody, for example, the client in the government, who ensures that the design follows the specifications and the standards. And the same thing, when this design is taken to construction, there is somebody independent who makes sure that the design is followed. I don't know if that is the same thing in Kenya. Thank you.
Well, Helen, are you in, which state are you in?
I'm in Maryland.
Maryland.
Yes.
So you have pointed out that in the US, if I design,
yes,
I'll step out for someone else to follow and make sure the design is implemented accordingly. Is that what
exactly.
you say?
Exactly. In other words, when we give a project to a consulting designer to do, they do their work, and once they have completed that, they send it to somebody independent to verify that what they have done follows specific standards and specific requirements. In other words, there is requirements that are put there that if you're doing this, for example, if you are installing a traffic signal, these are the things that you're supposed to do. So once you have done that, you have to put it to somebody else who would verify that before it is taken to construction.
I think here is different. We tend to stick with and be the implementers of the design. But I know a couple of clients, they have developed this concept of design review and peer review. So yeah, Helen, does that answer your question?
The problem that I'm having is we are talking about ethics. If the person who designed that is the same person who is reviewing it, what stops that person from hiding something inside there that is unethical?
Fantastic. That's a very important point. And do we then want to think about this and put it in our standards of practice and all that? So yes, that then I am an advocate for Eurocodes. And Eurocodes really places a high premium that when you design, you are not only qualified but experienced, but also that the design will be subjected to quality control, because there must be consistency from design, execution, material testing.
Yes.
Quality control is a matter to consider end to end. I think those are pertinent points, Helen, you've raised. And yeah, I want to hear what colleagues meet. I am Francis Moturi says the availability of engineering opportunities is directly proportional to the level of ethics employed in the practice of the profession. Most engineers who thrive in other fields may not endeavor to practice engineering due to the delayed gratification that lies in the profession. Pertinent. Most of us may be unable to direct services that we are of little competence in to those who are more competent, since it would mean sharing the proceeds I would personally state that until an engineer is gratified by the fruits of their labor, the code of ethics will suffer. All in all, the presentation was worthwhile. Okay, any other hand up, or I read the more comments from members? Engineer Stanley, I suspect this is Engineer Stanley Musau. The client can choose or opt for peer review by a consultant of his choice. That in view ensures no collusion. Yeah, great point there. John Muriuki, how do you deal with clients who actively refuse to have the construction plan submitted to the counties for approval? These are the same clients who refuse to engage engineers for construction supervision. Nazi Poet, regulators and county governments not promoting professional development of young engineers, which would aid in them in carrying out their duties. Engineer Obed Kigen, timely reminder by Engineer Kitololo, considering the current turn of events across many project institutions involving engineers in the country. Engineer Professor F.D. Kishaga taught us this at UN. Yeah, Professor taught us ethics at UN, I remember. Any other hand? Job Kitetu, please go on.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to get a clarification on the difference between what the previous speaker was talking about how it is done in Europe and in terms of making sure that the designer is not the one who makes sure that ethics are followed. I just wanted to understand the difference between that and what is normally done. The designer is not the approver. So what is really the difference between that?
But is that the case? When someone is within your office, you see what we are looking is a separation. I think that is a concept he was bringing up. Someone totally different does peer review and checks. And a couple of donor-funded projects even in our country, this process has been instituted. And I'll tell you, you do the design, and there's a very rigorous design check. So I think the point he was bringing out is that independent review. And I think it's quite important. Okay. William Kilonzo, engineers have to write specifications for specific projects. Standards are general. Godfrey Dibogo, something to note is design review is done by a team different from the team that initially designed. I think that's another contribution to the same topic. Ambrose Whiter, engineer Ambrose Whiter, engineers should always be guided in all their relations by the highest standards of honesty and integrity. Fantastic. I think that's why we are here asking ourselves, do we then do that? And then Engineer Musembi is concurring with Helen, as problem occur at county level due to use of unregistered county staff and all public works county staff who may not be competent enough, especially during approvals. Eliud Mwendo, one of the great challenges faced in growing the engineering ethics is that the reference standards available internationally lack direct linking and adaptation into the practice codes and standards. Those are fantastic thoughts, colleagues. Just trying to see if there is another hand raised up. Engineer Maurice Kagwi. Engineer Maurice Kagwi. You can share your thoughts on the topic.
He's not in the room, but Engineer Joseph Kamau has raised his hand.
No, Maurice Kagwi is here. He's actually requesting to be unmuted, but we can, as we unmute Engineer Maurice Kagwi.
Let me check, just a minute.
We can hear from Engineer, is it Joseph Kamau?
Hello, good evening.
Yes, proceed, Engineer.
No, got a question about being young in the industry and finding the contractors who are there in the industry before. Now, you take a specification, maybe class 25 or class 30, Then the contractor decided to use another class, which is not in the specification, but says that due to my experience, this one has worked ever, and I've been using it. So I would like to get a direction on how such a case might be handled, of where you have rogue contractors, have a rogue team not confining by restriction of not following to what we want them to do in a layman language where you can find that they are using example that it has worked and it has never failed us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Important point. Engineer Morris Kagwe.
Yes. Good evening to the team. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
So thank you so much, Engineer Sharma and IEK for this presentation. I think for us, it gives us time to reflect on how we are working and the ethics of our profession, which really, especially in the building sector, we are not doing well. I thank Engineer Kitololo, a senior in the profession, and especially in the building sector. I think he has seen the sector grow and even morph or rather change to what we have now, where this issue of ethics is now really catching up with the engineers we have. But what I pick from this discussion is that the issues we have are not really, they are not unexpected. I think there are issues which are expected and they are part of the growth of the profession. So for me, I think what I have collected here is that there are several things that need to be solved if we really want to really harness our capacity in the sector and deal with the ethics, the unethical matters that we have. I have tried to summarize them. There are three. I think we have to sort the fee issue. We will not be able to deal with the ethics of the professions if we are still grappling with the matter of the fee. Because what I have realized is that clients will tend to go for the cheapest in the market. And that's where the real deal is. If you go for the cheapest, then you are not sure of the quality also. So I think we have to try and know how best we can deal with the fee issue. The other one is if you want the ethics to really work, we also have to know how each cadre of the engineering sector in buildings is going to benefit. If we have professional engineers and we want to be ethical, we have to know how to protect our graduate engineers who are also offering services in the same sector, so that it will now not be a competition or rather a way of survival. It will become a way of life whereby any cadre will act professionally and they will benefit from what they are doing. I think that's also very important. Then the third thing I have noted is that we have to look at our regulations. When I look at all the other building sector, the practitioners in the market, I'm not saying they are doing well also ethically, but maybe even their responsibility as regards the buildings are not as much as the engineers. Yet on their end, they have been able to organize their sectors in a way that we know how they are paid, we know what their responsibilities are, and they are put so well. But when we go to the engineers, we don't have regulations that are out there that we can even quote and tell our people, or rather the public, this is what the engineer does, and out of what he does, this is what we guide they should be paid, So we also need to really look into the regulation issue. And I think our board has picked that, but already those of us who are in the media have seen already the anti-competition authority is already attacking. So we really need to look into it, We also need to look into other jurisdictions. What are they doing in other countries? And because we have to build the sector, we have to build the engineering sector and make it thrive. Otherwise, we are going to kill the best minds we have, the people who put most efforts to develop their professions, and it will not be good for the country. Another thing I have heard from our colleague from the United States, and it is very good to hear from him, is about the independent reviewer. That matter is very important because mostly some of us who have worked in big projects, we are awarded consulting contracts, but then we have a reviewer, maybe another company, even in the US, South Africa, ARUP, etc., whom we send the designs for review before we submit the complete designs to the client. So I think that is something we need to work around and see. But I think the model we have can easily be adapted because normally we have a client, assuming it's a government project, we have the client has an engineer's office also there. If it's a county, we expect them to have engineers in their offices. So it's just about redefining and improving their capacity so that even if a consultant does their part, they have an engineering office that is complete and equipped to actually review that design and improve it if needed. So I think that's a process that we can really try and improve. And if a client does not have that capacity, we should be able to have a system that shows them where to go, so that now we have a complete design that is it addresses the many needs that we need to address. So thank you so much, Engineer Sharma, for this discussion. I think we shall be part of it so that we continue trying to see how we can benefit this building sector. It's very important and very key to the development, but we are worried that what is happening currently is not healthy. It's not healthy for an engineer to have 35 projects in a year. He cannot build his house and he needs to survive. I think we need actually to think about those things so that this sector thrives. If you have 1 or 2 projects, you do them, you work on them nicely, you oversee them, and you make your life. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer. Those are very important points. John G here, with respect to the question from our brother in USA, Maryland, approvals by county engineers check standards substantially during approvals before design moves to construction. Other organizations that have engineering functions does similar approvals before construction. I think the point, and this is what really I treasure the moments of interacting across the globe. I have worked with engineers from Australia, from the UK, from the US, from Canada, and all over the place. So I mean, it brings a lot of value to share ideas across the board. And what our colleague from the Maryland has put, it's a point to ponder. I think separating that so that the design and review are not in the same office would add a lot of value. There is a trend where the contractors, that is from Diana Keter, there's a trend where the contractors are riding on where engineers have ethically failed to discredit the need for engineers, especially for services. This is bringing a culture where clients are going directly to contractors for design with the blind side of the interest of contractors. How can this be addressed? Yeah, we really have to address this. Is a real pertinent issue because clients see contractor as the one who solves their problem. They want to ignore the engineer and go to the contractor. And basically, we really have to look at this. Now we have Daniel Diritu. IAK and EBK needs to follow up to ensure that to ensure the approvers of engineering designs and drawings. Okay, let me just make sure I read that correctly. And are competent more so at county level. Yeah, to avoid the approver being incompetent, I'm thinking we should have professional engineers in approving bodies. Very important point. Thank you, Engineer Maurice Jeroge. Those are great points. That is Caroline Ayeko. Beyond Nyawade, I think that the focus should go beyond mere performance with the code of ethics or some kind of policy. Engineers should work and act honestly and with integrity even when no one is watching. Very important. Job Omoke, I think engineering being a science, it's difficult to cut corners in the design phase because the consequences of our work are real time. The system is judged as either adequate or inadequate. Job Omoke, the challenge is monitoring that the approved designs are implemented and submitted. Calls for employment of engineers whose only work is to carry out checks to maintain ethics in the profession. Let us as engineers lead the rest of the society in rectitude. Thank you, Engineer Kitololo, for reminding us. Lenson Nyongesa, quite interesting and informative. Now, I want to ask Engineer Arif Ali. Engineer Arif Ali. Engineer Arif Ali is still muted. Engineer Benjamin Nyawade. Engineer Benjamin Nyawade is a muted. Secretariat, any other person who is hand is lifted up? Any other?
Engineer Robert Joshua.
Engineer Robert Joshua, please go on and make your comments.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Kitembe. Okay, let me make it clear. I'm not an engineer. I'm a graduate electrical engineer. That is clear. There is something I want to comment about doing design and getting someone else to review. Now, if there is no appropriate or a good policy to guide that kind of principle in the country, it cannot work, because what happens most of the time, you find engineers, and let us say what it is, we tend to listen too much to the client, to the extent that we fail to be ethical. Like you cannot go against him fearing of losing the job. Now, it happens that, for example, if you do the design, then he goes behind you and consults another person on the same design, then he gets something is a miss. Of course, there'll be a conflict already between you and the person doing the review, or someone you don't know, maybe the client has just consulted. So that kind of conflict must also be checked if, for example, we want to do such kind of implementation. Number two, now what encourages designs by contractors? My view is there is a lot of laxity, especially by the engineers in the public sector. The engineers in the ministries who don't really do what they should do, but concentrate on their own personal stuff. So it should be their responsibility. If, for example, you have the opportunity to work in the public sector, you should be remembering always remembering at the back of your mind the code, and always cite the code of conduct and ethics for engineers, so that this kind of unethical behaviors don't happen, and we try to do away with some of the risks that happen in the construction industry. I think that is what I could add on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. There is a point that has been raised somewhere in the chat. Sorry. Simon Gugi, there's a general trend by clients, government included, to discourage consultants in the built industry. There is also a general feeling that consultants in the built industry tend to overreach their jurisdictions in buildings. It is mostly architects reaching into the forte of engineers so that they specify on-site engineering design without taking professional indemnity of the same. And number three, we also have a situation where senior engineers do not remunerate junior engineers. End result is a demotivated workforce. We work on the above and we will be reclaiming ethics with our field. I think that's a challenge to us, at least so that me and every other engineer, we remunerate properly. Oscar Luca, is it ethically acceptable in engineering practice for approvals to be made by graduate engineers, especially in government authorities? And then that is from Oscar Luca. Then Paul Galaxy. Well, Paul's Galaxy. The issue of integrity is key and sticking to the design criteria. This has really helped me during implementation of projects, as I have been working for contractors who normally complain about my strictness to design specifications. Well done, engineer, for your strictness. And this answers a question raised earlier, how to deal with raw contractors. You see, really, if you have a design and you enforce its implementation, and you ensure that contractors or the tests on materials meet specifications, you then do not have a space to start negotiating. But if you want to start negotiating, then you're going to eat some money here and there, and before long, you'll have accepted works which are of low quality. And so that is point that has been raised there is very important. Now, Engineer Benjamin Nyawade, if you're not available, then we want now to move towards hearing if Engineer Kitololo has a few last comments so that we continue to wind down the webinar. Engineer Austin Kitololo.
Let me unmute him.
Oh, that okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I know a lot of points have been raised. I'll make comments on a few of them. I think there was a question of supplanting, this normally happens when one goes behind and uses the influence with the client to remove somebody who was recommended for a certain assignment, or even when he had even started working and he is removed without really any reason. If an engineer performs poorly, I mean, the client has got every right to remove him and put somebody. Now, that is not supplanting. That is replacement, which is acceptable. Then there was the question of rubber stamping. That is immoral. You should not allow your name to be used by the contractors to get approval or to look as if they have got a locally qualified engineer. I have seen this with some Chinese contractors. I've been to a number of sites and I ask who is the engineer, and the Chinese would say, I am the engineer, but I said, but you need somebody registered in the country. I said, oh yeah, I've got somebody who signed. I gave him something, and he signed for me. And so I asked them, now in a situation like that, if anything goes wrong, who is going to be responsible, you or that person you paid off? And they wouldn't come with an answer. So this is something that we ourselves can stamp out. We ourselves can stand firm and say, I will not sign something I have not designed. Yeah. And I think that is the kind of stand we should take. Now, there is the question of architect versus the structural engineer. Now, I think it's the structural engineers who allow it to happen. An architect is not, or rather, an engineer is not subordinate to an architect. The architect has got his own responsibilities, and the engineer has got his own responsibilities, and they work together as a team. There is nobody who is more senior or more superior than the other. I know even in the public works conditions of engagement, it clearly states that the client can appoint any of the three. That means engineer, architect, and quantity surveyor to be the lead consultant. Yeah, it is not always the architect who must be the lead consultant. It's the engineer themselves, the structural engineer himself, who has allowed the architect to dictate things. Yeah, I have worked with architects, many architects, and in many times I tell them this is how it is going to be, because that is the most advantageous structural system, and we are going to have it this way. Yeah, and in many cases they say, okay, fine. I mean, you, the engineer, you will do it that way. You know, so it's really up to the structural engineer to understand his position. He is the engineer of the project, yeah, and not the architect. The architect is not the engineer of the project. The quantity surveyor is not the engineer of the project. It is the structural engineer who is the engineer of the project. And that is the stand that we should take as engineers. And you will see the architects will start sort of softening and leaving it to you to run, leaving it for the engineer to run engineering matters in a project. Specifications, yes, engineers are expected to write both material specifications and work specifications as far as the structure is concerned. You cannot expect somebody else to write specifications for you. Yeah, we have got specifications, or rather, as consultants, we have got specifications for RC work, we've got specifications for civil works, we've got specifications even for plumbing works. You know, where the engineer is involved, he should be able to write specifications for himself. Yeah. Then I think one of them was the question of approvals by the local authorities. In our time, the local authorities, the structure, the approval was being carried out by qualified engineers. It was senior engineers. And in many cases, they appreciated the fact that the design engineer, that is the consultant, is the designer and the owner of that particular project. So they were rating in City Hall especially. They were rating engineering firms. You know, they said these are firms which are, say, in class A, and any work submitted by these firms will only be accepted and not approved. Yeah, we cannot approve something we have not checked. Yeah, so there were two categories. There were those ones whose submissions were accepted, and the others whose submissions are approved. Now, the ones who are in category B, they would submit drawings plus calculations, and the City Hall engineers would go through thoroughly through those calculations and the drawings and the details very thoroughly. And if they've got any queries, they would call in the engineer and discuss, yeah, and agree in some, on the way forward. Yeah, so this approval was there, but over time it has just disappeared, to an extent that nothing is done, even nothing is checked. Yeah, you submit the drawings, and depending on who has prepared the drawings, in other words, which firm has prepared the drawings, they just stamp them as approved, and that's it, which is wrong. Yeah. So in Maryland, what they are doing is what we used to do here, but things have changed over time. In other words, we are becoming less and less professional. You know, that's what it amounts to, which is very unfortunate. Yeah, and the other one, there were many things, but I picked a few. Rogue contractors. Yeah. Now, a contractor is subordinate to a professional, and he does what the, say in this case, the engineer has designed and the engineer has specified. And he should not question that unless it is a sort of some glaring error which would lead to disaster. But he cannot act as if he is the boss, even if he's a friend or a relative of the employer, so to speak, the client. He should not take any position looking as if he is in control of the project. It is the professional who is in control of the project. So the engineers, we have to stand firm there. There are a lot of things which we can do ourselves, which we have over time allowed it to happen. Yeah, and I think we should go back and see where the rain started to beat us, like Engineer Sharma says. When did the rain start to beat us? Well, we allowed the rain to beat us. The rain is always there, but we allowed ourselves to be beaten by to beat us. Now, then there is a question of MEP consultants. This is the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing guys. I didn't quite understand whether we want this to be approved, their inputs to be approved, or what. I know this area of MEP is a weak link in engineering services. A lot of times the work is done by plumbers or electricians, and the engineers don't seem to be in of their areas. Well, I think the question, the matter of approving their work, should be taken seriously. Yes, it should be approved by the authorities, just like the structural and civil engineering, structural things. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Yes, clients prefer cheapest or cheaper engineers. Yes, this question is. I think I think it was brought about by maybe by this procurement act, because the scales should be there. It doesn't matter who does the work; they apply the same scales. So the question of undercutting really, or clients preferring cheaper engineers should not arise at all, because you should be paid for the same services. I mean, there is the scale of fees. I don't see why we should work outside the scale of fees. Negotiations is permitted, yes, but that is after, you know, after you have been recommended to do the services, maybe now you can now sit down and negotiate, or rather the owner of the can call you in and you negotiate. Say, okay, fine, this is the fee, but I wanted to pay this. We come across this many times, after we have been, the team has been assembled and selected and assembled, the client would say, well, your total fees might come to say 17%, but I am paying 12, yeah, and you agree, that is permitted. I don't think there's anything unethical about that. That should be permitted. Okay. Now those are my few comments on what has been raised, what has been pointed out here. So thank you very much. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much for being keen. I just want to sign off and note comments that engineers have put across here. Very many of them. Job Omoke IKBK needs to make public aware of the role of engineers. And I think we are doing that, and we are doing our best to do that. George Kagia, in structural projects, the structural engineer takes the higher risks, and then the pay doesn't seem to reflect that. Obed Kagan, again, most unethical issues in the construction chain process occur in procurement. Very pertinent point, and contract project management. Stage engineers should not get entangled by some clients' unethical demands. Very pertinent point. George Kagia, agree with electric graduate engineer, a registered should be such integrity. A registered should be of such integrity as to conclude design and supervision without need to be supervised. Thank you, Engineer Kitololo, Engineer Sharma, and IK for this team. Joshua Chalo, IK should follow up with engineering consulting firms to firm up the ratio in which consultant, rep, PE, rep, graduate, the ratio is wanting. Sites are frequently supervised by graduate engineers. I believe that this is Engineer Musembi. I believe there should be a minimum cap for engineers' fees. And I think the scale of fees is ongoing. So I think members are on point when they're raising this issue. David Nyakundi, speaking of scale of fees, how about government agencies paying different salaries for same job group, in this case, entry level, example, parastatus and PSC? Yeah, this is an issue that we have discussed at IEK to push with the Directorate of Personnel Management with Public Service Commission, just to make sure that the entry level for a graduate engineer is not the same with a BA graduate. I mean, because that has an impact and even how they rise in their careers. Mohammed Ahmed Abdi, the consequences of any unethical behavior in the industry of building construction can lead to confidence reduction in the profession, continuous insecure practice, risk lives, and property loss of income by clients and governments, needless and baseless expenditures that raise levels of poverty and reduce the quality of life, amongst other things. Very important points. And I think this now brings to the end this webinar. I do appreciate our speaker, Engineer Kitololo. I do appreciate every member who has contributed and followed us on YouTube. I profusely apologize for the technical challenges we faced at the beginning of the webinar, which kept me off for almost 40 minutes. And I was supposed to be moderating. But eventually I was able to join. So thank you very much for being patient with us. And I think we'll continue with this conversation. An important note from Engineer Rifali, the issue of rubber stamping can be for both locally designed projects and projects designed outside the country. The problem is in the implementation of the project, as the engineer on record makes site visits, inspections after stamping. Very important point. So, colleagues, yeah.
Engineer Mbiu Kimani wants to talk.
Engineer Mbiu Kimani is a senior colleague. I really cannot fail to allow him to speak. Senior Karibu, and make your comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate my senior Engineer Kitololo for that well presented seminar, points on ethics. I wanted to comment on something, especially on the scale of fees, because I sit on the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board. And recently there was a case where on the NHIF building, somebody had a charge below the scale of fees. And this was brought to their attention. And we threw that case out because the documents had been made saying that they follow fees according to the fees which are issued by their institutions, by their board. So this is an issue which I think should be taken up. And I think the people in government and public bodies, when they draw these procurement documents, should borrow from that and put that the fees should follow those scales, and whoever goes below the minimum should be disqualified. And I think it's us who are doing us the service, especially the engineers doing the procurement documents in the public sector. So that is a case study, a case which has now been dealt with, and they should follow that. But if they don't follow it anyway, the public procurement will go by what they put, but that is now allowed that nobody should change the minimum. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Mbiu Kimani. That is a timely point that you have pointed out there. I do now want to bring this to a close. Linda, we are together on that?
Yes, that's in order. Although, have you gone through the questions I shared? The ones members did while registering?
Yeah, I've noted that.
Yeah.
Some of them have actually been asked again, very important, and you realize they cut across what has been posted on chat and what members have raised. It really cuts across, and thank you very much. I really want to bring this to a close. Engineer Mungeria Kirimania, to ensure engineers are involved, there is need to legislate maintaining of records of compliance to specifications for a period of not less than 6 years, as in PPOA requires procurement and finance record to be maintained. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I want to bring this to an end. There are also questions in YouTube. Yes, YouTube questions have also been posted to me by the Secretariat in private chat, so I've been reading them. Thank you, Engineer Banan Makar, for pointing that out. Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone. We really appreciate the enthusiasm in which you have participated. And certainly we must bring up this conversation later because of the kind of questions it has aroused. So this brings to a close the webinar in the interest of time. Thank you, everyone. Linda, do you want to do a photo?
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Put on your videos.
We put on our videos, everyone. I've seen Professor Manuel Kipkorir. Hey, Prof. Thank you very much. Linda, we will share the photos. And then you can close the session from your end, Linda.
No problem. And then I urge engineers to come to the conference that will be in the second week of November. We hope to further these discussions there.
Fantastic. Correct. Engineer Nyabongo, I've noted your comment. Thank you very much for participating.
Okay. Okay.
We meet physically, so we have to go digital. So the membership information management systems is one of the things that we have been very keen on, and a lot of work has been put into it, and the setup is work in progress. We look forward to finalizing it.
The Institution of Engineers of Kenya is the Learned Society of Engineers. It's a welfare society for all engineers in Kenya. We try to improve the welfare of our members by organizing courses for them to keep up to speed with what is happening in our industry. As the council, my team and I undertook with zeal the task of achieving the 2019-2023 strategic plans, and in particular, the 5 key goals of growing the IEK membership, improving expertise, achieving revenue growth, and strengthening our governance and institutional structures and systems. I'm proud to say we have made great progress towards achieving these goals.
past 1 year, the Council has developed and adopted HR policies and a new organizational structure. Based on this new organizational structure, we are planning to recruit staff. We recognize that our staff are our greatest asset to drive this strategy. We are looking for staff who are committed, passionate about our mission, and together they will be able to support us to deliver on our strategic objectives.
The Council is committed to achieving 20,000 growth in membership by 2023. And that's why today we are launching the Membership Information Management System, the MIMS, to ensure that we are able to do the membership processes in a very short time.
Since taking up office as the current council, we were very keen on growing membership and going digital. So COVID-19 has actually fast-tracked digitization because we couldn't meet physically, so we have to go digital. So the membership information management systems is one of the things that we have been very keen on, and a lot of work has been put into it, and the setup is work in progress. We look forward to finalizing it because this improves the security of our operations and helps in growing our membership. We were also able to do our annual conference, which was a hybrid that was physical and virtual. And through this, we were able to have a lot of people attend the conference virtually amidst the COVID-19 protocols.
The Institution of Engineers of Kenya Strategic Plan 2019-2023 identifies membership growth as one of the key strategic goals. As of December 2020, the membership actually grew from 8819 to 9704. This one representing a growth rate of 8.2%. As an institution, we have developed a number of initiatives to ensure that we grow this membership. We have developed professional interview documents, and with these documents, we have conducted professional interview mentorship programs in which 1,131 graduate engineers have participated in. As a result of these trainings, we've seen an upsurge in the application from graduate engineers wanting to become professional engineers over the last 4 months. Additionally, in order to grow membership, and specifically graduate engineers mentorship, we have devised virtual interviews programs. And as of December 2020, electrical panels have been able to conduct virtual interviews. Going forward, the 3 other boards will be conducting these virtual interviews from next year.
Thinking about communication, we have moved to a lot of digital communication. Right now, we know 70% up to 90% of the world spends their time on the phone. So as IEK, we've had to embrace digital platforms, mainly the social media platforms, which is Facebook, LinkedIn. And through this, we are able to communicate a lot of happenings of the council. And through these platforms, we've been able to get a lot of inquiries and new members getting informed. When it comes to the gender composition within the engineering fraternity, it currently stands at about 10%. One of our midterm goals is to grow it up to 30% so that we can get more women participating and assuming high board leadership positions within engineering.
We also committed to ensuring that we devolve our services to the grassroots. And as Institution of Engineers of Kenya, we are empowering our branches. And as of December this year, we have actually activated 3 additional branches, and these are the Northeastern, the Capital Branch, and the North Rift Branch. And we envisage that by January next year, these branches will be active, and they will be assisting us in our membership drive in bringing additional members into the Institution of Engineers of Kenya.
also pushed growth in awareness of our members at the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. We are lobbying for the Engineers Board of Kenya to accent to the Washington Accord. By doing so, our members will be able to get international recognition and therefore able to work in other countries that have signed up the Mutual Recognition Agreement.
We would love to appreciate our members, who are our greatest asset. We'd also love to appreciate our staff at the Secretariat, who've worked dedicatedly and have been committed throughout this year, especially during this COVID period, in achieving our strategic goals.
We remain steady towards making IEK stronger and better for future generations and for service to humanity.
Together, we can make it.
Together, we shall make it.
I'm very confident that together we shall be able to make this a success.
Together, we can make it.
I urge all of you to keep working with us towards the implementation of this 2019-2023 strategic plan. I am convinced that with your support, we shall make it.